Discussion keeps the world turning.
This is Roundtable.
You're listening to Roundtable. I'm Niu Honglin, joined by Steve and Fei Fei. Coming up soon, we still focus on kids' development, but from another perspective, from within the family. Parenting advice often focuses on grades, extracurricular activities, or screen time. But new research drawing on a large international data set suggests something surprisingly simple might also matter: household chores. By analyzing responses from over 50,000 teenagers across 15 countries, researchers are exploring whether the way families share responsibilities at home might influence how children behave socially, including whether they bully their peers. Stay with Roundtable to find out the details. And people say you are what you eat, so we aim to eat better. More vegetables, fewer processed foods, less sugar, less fat. And those messages have helped many people build healthier habits. But somewhere along the way, the idea of eating clean has taken on a life of its own. What begins as a positive effort to care for our bodies can sometimes become an obsession. Is eating clean always good for you? Where exactly is the line between discipline and distress? But before that, think about the chore chart on your fridge for a moment. Who does what? Who washes? Who dries? Who takes out the trash? Now consider this. A recent analysis by researchers in China, drawing on international student data collected across different cultural contexts, suggests that the answer to those everyday questions might influence more than just who cleans up after dinner. It could actually shape how children treat other people as they grow up. That idea reframes something as mundane as, dividing household labor into something unexpectedly significant. And once you see it that way, it's hard not to wonder what else the data might reveal. And the data has a name. This is the OECD data set. And what's that?
Well, we'll start there because the researchers in China, that's what their study was based on. It was based on the OECD data set. So that data came from surveys that was compiled by the OECD, and it covered 50,000 young people between the ages of 10 and 16 across 15 different countries. Now, I don't have the list of all 15 different countries, but typically OECD member economies in Europe and East Asia and North America are covered when they do this type of research. So the students in the OECD study, the students answered detailed questions that included things like family structure and parental roles, who does household labor, like mom or dad, or is it shared, or neither, meaning nobody does it. Also their own attitudes and behaviors towards their own classmates, and then self-reported involvement in bullying or negative peer interactions. So those were the things that were studied in the OECD data set. The students themselves, they provided the answers to all of those questions, and then it's powerful, they say, because it links home environment to peer behavior. And they did it across, like I said, tens of thousands of students. So the researchers were allowed to test relationships that are usually difficult to isolate, particularly in different cultures. So once the Chinese researchers had all of that data, they decided to conduct their own study.
Yeah, these researchers coming from Shanghai Jiao Tong University, that based, of course, in Shanghai, and they focused on one specific question. Is there a relationship between how household labor is divided and whether teenagers engage in bullying? And so the reason that they are focusing on the issue of bullying is because it's a well-documented, measurable behavior in OECD surveys and is often used as an indicator for empathy, aggression, and social dominance. So this is kind of a unique angle taken from the Chinese researchers, and most discussion about chores focus on independence or discipline, but instead this study is asking what happens at homes, and how is that going to shape how kids treat other people outside of the home?
Yeah, that's what they were looking at. It's interesting,
Yeah,
huh?
it's interesting, and I kind of get it because at least for my generation, we had a lot of discussion. Well, there were a lot of discussions around us when we were kids. That is, we were focusing on academic work too much. We were spoiled a bit too much because as a kid in the family, we were not asked to start with, share a lot of household chore. We were asked to study a bit more or have fun a bit more or learn something as a hobby after your house school hours. And that was the situation for my generation when we were kids. I think it's been improved a little bit. We see more and more schools and more families asking their kids to learn about labor-related courses, or that might be a topic of another day. But definitely for these kind of family structure, you would see the household chore being shared by different members in the family. And I'm so eager to know what are the results of the research.
So the Chinese, now we go to focus on the Chinese researchers' results. So they identified 4 different types of households with clear distribution among the chores. So this is what they found. 33% were egalitarian households. That means both parents share responsibilities relatively equally. 45% were what they called traditional households. Some sharing, but moms still did the majority of the housework. 17% were traditional households. That would be clearly divided gender roles. Maybe dad takes out the trash, mom cooks the dinner, things like that. And then 5% disengaged households. In disengaged households, that's the lowest percentage. That means low levels of responsibility and involvement from really anyone.
So
in
they
the
have
house.
domestic help at home,
Or they're not at home often, like traveling or on business trip or for jobs, maybe?
Perhaps. The reasons weren't really specified, but just it says that there's not enough participation really from anyone.
No taking responsibility
Yeah,
of the home.
exactly.
Yeah.
So this is the most important finding because this is the behavioral outcome. Students from egalitarian households, that means both parents share responsibilities equally, students from those households were significantly less likely to report bullying others. Remember, this is the main question of the Chinese study. Is there a connection between household chores and bullying in school? So students who came from the shared responsibility households, they were less likely, significantly less likely, to report bullying others. But those from disengaged households, meaning the bottom percent, the 5%, those were the kids who showed the highest rates of bullying behavior.
Huh.
That's really interesting. And I think it also says this kind of relationship even held even after accounting for other factors typically linked to bullying. So that means the family structure itself sort of play an independent role when in this child development, especially when it comes to the issue surrounding bullying.
This is what they found, yeah. And disengaged here, you were asking for specific reasons like business trips or things like that. They didn't talk about that. But what they did say was that disengaged family households means low parental involvement overall,
Bingo.
where children may not regularly experience shared responsibility or guidance or accountability.
I was thinking about that because judging by the results of the research, you can easily draw a link between the house chore sharing pattern with whether or not they bully their peers at school. But if we want to dig into the reasons behind it, it is possible that if you're imagining a family that is a family with shared responsibility pattern, that the parents respect each other, it's not hard to imagine that the family or parenting education for the kid is a bit more comprehensive. They would have more time together, and the kids would be able to always witness a healthy relationship between their parents.
It's not so much about the healthy relationship with the parents as it is about something else. And this is where the light bulb will come on in just a moment. But at this point, when I was doing, learning about this topic, I still didn't get the connection. Yeah, okay, but what's the connection with bullying? I don't really get it. Here's what they found. So the disengaged households tended to have, the kids from the disengaged households tended to have a more fixed mindset, meaning that they might be more likely to judge others harshly rather than adapt or empathize. Okay, why? That doesn't really answer our questions just yet. But it comes down to gender differences. So the patterns were significantly stronger among boys, suggesting that boys may be more influenced by observed household roles when forming social behavior. And this is what that means. If you view certain behavior from your parents in your household in terms of divided gender roles, let's say mom is a woman, so she cooks and cleans all the time. As a young boy, that's what I see. So I form an opinion. Women are meant to cook and clean. Dad goes to the company, he comes home late at night or whatever. Okay, that's what men do. Now, the problem with that, according to this study, is that when they go to school and they see other young boys not behaving the way that they expect a man to behave, maybe a little bit more feminine, right? A little bit softer, a little bit more emotional, they think, you're not a man, you're not a boy, and that's what leads to the bullying. If they see a young girl in their school, and wait a minute, you're not acting like a woman is supposed to behave, quote unquote, maybe a little bit tougher personality, maybe a little bit less feminine, then that could lead to bullying as well, and that's the connection.
I understand, and I'm not expert or a scientist, but that's where I don't completely agree, because from that logic, the logic is drawn from the study, from the results of the study. We see it's supposed to be for the traditional households, because in traditional households, you see more sharing of mother doing more house chore and dad doing more nothing. And that is a typical or stereotypical kind of mentality that will be formed or rooted in their heart. And from that point of view, perhaps those from relatively traditional households or transitional households might bully a bit more. Yet we're looking at disengaged households. Those from these households would show the most activity when it comes to bullying. So I think family education still is a very important factor here. But that being said, I think this is still a very valuable study. When it comes to social behavior or behavioral science or psychology, one thing, at least from my personal view, is that it can not always teach you what to do, because each individual can be a little bit different, but it can give you a takeaway, one or two, about what not to do. What not to do is don't be absent from your family. Don't create a disengaged family. Respect your significant other.
Yeah, my takeaway from this is, and again, this wasn't talking about, this particular study was not talking about, oh, young children should participate in household chores. It wasn't talking about that. It was talking about the message that the parents are sending the children when they are behaving in a certain way when it comes to household chores within the house. And the focus was on this. If men don't actively participate in the household chores, you are sending a dangerous message to your young son. This was the focus of the message. Do you agree with that, or do you not?
I sort of see that link. I think when they're talking about the issue of bullying, they focus a lot on, so for example, empathy, accountability, and for those who has this kind of issue, they are maybe they don't have enough empathy for others, and that leads to problems like bullying. But when it comes to this particular study, I sort of see that link is that if they don't build that empathetic relationship with another human being, whether it be a family member with their parents, or going outside with a peer or classmate, or some stranger on the street, the root cause is basically built in the family. It's built when your dad and mom talking with each other on a daily basis and how they talk to you on a daily basis. And that has sort of built a mindset that will influence you for the rest of your life when you are talking to the society. And I think that I sort of see that link that when we're trying to build empathy in our children's mindset, it's not as simple as, for example, reading them some books about you need to be empathetic to the world. It's not only just about, trying to do some volunteer jobs, for example, in your community. It's really
more than that.
Yeah,
more
doing one
complicated
laundry
than that.
or doing one dish is just as detailed as that.
Yeah, and it's unspoken too, because this is just stuff that the children are watching in the household. It's not a discussion per se.
Yes. So after listening to this topic of discussion on Roundtable, let us know. What do you think? Is there anything that you want to take away from this topic? You're listening to Roundtable. Coming up next, eating too clean can backfire. Want to know why? Stay tuned.
Looking for passion? How about fiery debate? Want to hear about current events in China from different perspectives? Then tune in to Roundtable, where East meets West and understanding is the goal.
This is Roundtable with me, Steve Hatherley, and Fei Fei. In many ways, modern culture has turned food into a moral decision. Certain ingredients are labeled clean, others toxic. Some meals are celebrated as virtues, others treated almost like personal failures. I have to ask both of you, have you ever felt guilty eating certain things? And have you ever, chased after this goal of absolutely eating clean or period of feast for a while?
Of course, the regrets will always kick in after, for example, indulge myself with a donut.
A delicious piece of cake.
But you're still willing to eat that donut. Because that's important to this topic.
Well,
yes.
I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm not attacking you.
No, but if we're talking to a past myself, I would be, kind of reaching to a snap moment.
But I know why Steve is asking this, because we're talking about eating too clean to a certain extent.
Yeah, so this is called, when it goes too far, it's called orthorexia. And
is that even a word?
It is. And okay, so it's not formally recognized as a psychiatric disorder. The term was come up with by Dr. Stephen Bratman, he was an alternative medicine practitioner back in the 1990s. And he wrote in this non-scientific journal called Yoga Journal in 1997. And he came up with this term, orthorexia. But orthorexia is meant to mean, it comes from the origins of Greek meaning right, and that's the ortho, and then the rexia means appetite, so right appetite. But the idea is that your eating of clean food can go to the point where it's actually damaging you. It's when you get to the point where you'll feel guilty and you won't actually be willing to eat anything that you deem as quote-unquote not clean in your diet. And that can have a really negative impact on your emotions.
Yes, we're talking about a very rare situation, because in this society, you watch short videos, you sometimes actively search for some healthy diet. So it's not hard for us to identify the so-called clean and not clean food. We think vegetables are good. Boiled vegetables are better than fried vegetables. We think fat is bad, but maybe nuts are fine. These are relatively still fine, but for the extreme ones, they would go so far.
And that's the thing. When you are, to use his term, orthorexic, it means that you're obsessed with your food to the point where you'll cut out all fats or all carbs or all seasonings or all what have you, and you may be missing out on some essential nutrients that your body actually needs. Fats, for example, support hormone health and heart function. That's from the physical side. From the emotional side, this really rigid style of eating turns food from a source of nutrition into a source of fear or guilt or self-punishment. And that's why I said before, Fei Fei,
Are
but
you-
you still ate the donut,
Yes.
right? So that means no problem.
fine.
No problem. But if you make an active decision, I will never ever put something in my body that I fear is going to add unwanted calories to my diet, unwanted fat to my diet. This can take a mental toll and an emotional toll.
And also, I think in this today's age, when we get a lot of recommendations from online platforms that they're recommending different a number of dietary guidelines, we're not really sure how scientific or how right, quote unquote, right they are. And we see some, for example, online celebrities, when they're pushing or promoting this kind of diet, other people just follow blindly. And that create an even bigger problem when you are over fixating on optimizing your diet. You are trying eating fat. You want to eat the best fat.
Yes.
Trying to find which one is the best fat.
Yeah.
And that's problematic as well.
If you find yourself, if this strikes a chord with you, just try to keep this in mind. This is what the experts say. Healthy food does not make you sick. The odd snack will not make you sick. But the anxiety and the guilt and the rigid mindset that some people have around food, that can make you sick, because food is not morally good or bad. Eating a cookie doesn't make you a terrible person, and eating vegetables doesn't make you an amazing person. Try to find a healthy balance, not only for your gut and your belly, but also for your heart and your soul.
And for those who are exercising very hard, trying to learn a new language, trying to lose weight, trying to read more, I think all of those hobbies have one common thing to share. That is, they're trying to get the feeling of control over their life. And we can still do that. Just do not take any of those hobbies to the real extreme. Because here in China, we believe in the being moderate, being in the middle is quite the philosophy for a lot of different things, and trying to find the balance, the yin and yang in your life. And that brings us to the end of today's roundtable. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's topics. Leave us a comment wherever you listen to your podcast, or send us an email to roundtablepodcast@qq.com. I'm Niu Honglin with Steve and Fei Fei. Thank you for listening. Bye.